Here we are live on It's My Friday. My name is Scott Stanfield, and I am a modern longevitarian. And I want to welcome everybody watching on LinkedIn and also on the Spirituality Gone Wild network. And I'm so happy to be part of that team. And there's 18 different co-creators that have shows similar to this. And so you can tune in and learn so much from this group. We also have a club called the Untamed Club that you can join and learn from the vast experience and knowledge of all the people who have shows just like this. And so I'm so excited about today's show. This is going to be super cool because Allyssa LaScala, the Biohacking Bombshell, we've been Instagram friends for almost 2 years now. And we have exchanged messages and talked about several different things. We have so many different interests. So I want to say, Allyssa, welcome to the Modern Longevitarian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. I mean, and wow, the first question I always ask everybody, and this even dates back to me interviewing people in the restaurant world, is basically to give me a little bit of background, a little bit of context on how you got here to be the Biohacking Bombshell, because we don't really get asked what we want to be when we grow up, and things like this come up. So how'd you get here?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been into health and wellness since I was younger, growing up. I mean, early on in my life, when I was 8, my dad got diagnosed with lymphoma, right? So he has now had it for like 21 years. And so that was my first exposure to, even though he was 33 years old at the time, getting diagnosed with a chronic illness, how important it was to then change the nutrition, change those foundational, pillars, right? And take care of yourself. So I had always known that that's somewhat of what I wanted to do growing up, whether it was like one specific niche or another. I knew I wanted it to be in health. So I went to school for exercise and sports science, but while I was in college, I got diagnosed with Lyme disease and then adrenal fatigue and mold toxicity and breast implant illness and hypothyroidism. And so I honestly, it really was my own journey and how Western medicine wasn't enough to take care of me, that I really just catapulted myself into learning more about how to get to the root cause, identifying those factors that were really keeping us sick, tired, overweight, etc., and then helping other people understand how to address those and do the same. So that's what I do now as an integrative health practitioner. And in a nutshell, that's how I got where I'm at today.
So similar to me, but it started with me. I didn't really connect the dots when my grandparents were getting cancer and type 2 diabetes and those things. But when my dad, he was 55 and got diagnosed with prostate cancer, and mom, same thing, a couple of years later, because she's a little bit younger than dad, diagnosed with uterine cancer and age 55. Both of them had, went through the chemo, the surgery, they're survivors, mom turned 70 in April and dad's 72, and they're still kicking up a ruckus back in South Carolina and, those things. But that's what really, that was even though I'd been into health a long time, like even in my late teens, working out in the gym, drinking spirulina smoothies, vegetarian when I was in college, then gaining weight in the restaurant business and losing weight and doing Atkins and that type of stuff. Then when, I'm 31, 40 pounds overweight, borderline high blood pressure, right? And then that really kicked me off on this trail that I'm on now. And so here's the what was I was going to ask you another question, right? So this is the thing about being live, right? It's like you don't have a net, right? And then I told my story and I lost the whole thing. But one of the big things that, let's just skip to this part right here, is one of the big things that we've connected on is detoxing, right? Because you recently started doing coffee enemas and the root cause. All right. So let's just ask this question to get it out of the way, because I build this show is based from a tagline on your website, really is, why are you, or find the root cause of why are you sick, tired, and weight loss resistant? So let's kind of go down that trail there about what these root causes could be.
Yeah, because unfortunately, if you're just going to conventional medicine, and honestly, even some holistic doctors or naturopaths, we just got into this habit of band-aiding things, or, there's something wrong. Here's a medication, here's a surgery, or here's a supplement. And, supplements or medication surgeries, they can be necessary. So I will never knock that. It can do some incredible things for people, but it's just always the go-to. And then we stop there. right? And so getting to the root cause, which as we talk about coffee enemas later on in the show, we'll talk about the liver, we'll talk about drainage, but toxicities and nutrient deficiencies and someone's overall toxic load and exposure are the root causes as to why someone is having issues being able to lose weight, continuing to gain weight. Your hormones are imbalanced, but that's not just the reason why you're not able to lose weight. You have to go even deeper and say, why are the hormones imbalanced in the first place, right? So it's just continuing to ask why until we truly can't anymore. And we have to get to that root cause. Otherwise, we will just continue to stay sick, and your health issues that may have seemed fixed by a type of medication or a surgery, they will end up resurfacing in other areas of our health. And that's what we see happening so often.
Yeah. For me is, I had this eczema breakout on my face. First time I ever had anything like that. And I kept asking why? And then I asked the question a good friend of mine, Malia, she said, ask what you can do, right, about it. And that's where I started doing coffee enemas, right, is with that. And because it had been around for hundreds of years, right, and they're so beneficial, all the work that Dr. Max Gerson and his institute does and all those type of things. So tell me about coffee enemas and why they're important or why people should consider doing them.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you guys that are watching so I'm sure that we know what enemas are, but if you're not sure, essentially you are sticking something up your rectum, whether it's coffee or whether you do enemas with something else. So it can make a lot of people be like, I'm not doing that. And that was me at first. I'm like, I will do anything else other than go and do some type of enema. It did not sound attractive, sexy, or whatever. But when you're trying to heal, you would probably agree with me, Scott, that you have a different level of desperation where you're like, it may make me a little bit uncomfortable, but where I'm at is uncomfortable. So the alternative is it's worth it to be uncomfortable for a little bit. And It was when I first started doing it. But, as a practitioner, I know that there's a lot of clients that I have that are also resistant. And so I'm like, I have to go and be willing to do this if I'm going to tell somebody else that it's a possible thing that they can do. And I had tried so many other biohacks and whatnot, but this is the one thing I waited till last. But I know how incredibly beneficial it is, because for those of you guys that aren't familiar with coffee enemas and how they're working, essentially what's so awesome about the coffee part is the caffeine in the coffee is, you're inserting it into your rectum, but it's essentially hitting these veins that connect directly to your liver, opening up this bile duct, and it basically is dumping toxins right from your liver into your colon to be excreted. It's accelerating the rate of detoxification. And there's a lot of crap that can hide in there, a lot of flukes, parasites, like all this sludge. And if you're trying to accelerate that rate of detoxification, coffee enemas are so powerful, and there's almost nothing else like it out there. So Scott, I know you had your own experience with it. You've been doing them longer than I have, but I started to make it part of my regular routine, and it is a game changer. So if you want to detoxify your liver, which is one of your biggest drainage pathways, they're incredible.
Yeah, it is. Right. And so the thing for me was, I first heard about them when my wife was was in this game way before I was. She was a personal trainer teaching aerobics back in the day, for 15 years, had personal clients, one-on-one clients. And so I guess she was like, just a personal trainer. Right. And doing that stuff. And when my dad got cancer, I remember his response was, I can't stop driving he was a truck driver, right? He's retired now. He said, I can't stop driving my truck to go do a coffee enema, could do four a day, right? The way that the Gerson Institute does that. So I've known about him all these years, right? And his dad, my grandfather, passed away cancer at age 62. So I was like, and I never had in the back of my mind, like one day I'm going to do this, right? Never, right? But one thing I realized is that I wasn't going to eat my way out of this, right? It wasn't no amount of blueberries or being in ketosis or any of those things that was going to change it, because, the generations that you think like the blue zones, right? Somebody who's 100 years old, that was born in 1920, glyphosate wasn't entered in it, probably never in their life, right? Maybe as a byproduct of, but if they're in, Okinawa, Japan, they're probably not getting glyphosate. But someone who's born, 80 years ago probably went 40, 50 years before they got anything like that in their system, where we probably had it from like at conception, right? And so that's why this is the modern longevitarian, because we have to detox on a different level, right, than what previous generations, maybe not our parents, but the generations before that had to, right? Or maybe even grandparents.
You think about like amalgam silver fillings were done then. If you look at contact solution contacts and birth controls that contained things then that not now, like I know my parents that are in their 50s, they're still very toxic.
Yeah. So what we're moving away from here, when you start looking at root causes and doing what you do, we're moving away from this a pill for an ill. We're moving away from what I actually call whack-a-mole, healthcare, right? This popped up, let's hit that. This popped up, let's hit that. Oh, this is popping up because of a side effect of that other thing you're taking. So let's hit that over there, right? So this whole whack-a-mole thing, you're going down and going, okay, I want to see where the moles are underground, right? Where are the tunnels, right? And do those type of things. And so for me, it was, getting back to that, I was like, what can I do for my skin, right? And how can I do that? And so but here's the thing, I am okay with feeling better. I understand what you're saying about what's happening with the, with liver stimulation. I understand that glutathione production goes up to maybe 600%, right? And there's parasites there, but I didn't go digging through what came out of me. You did, right? So let's talk about that.
I did.
Yes, you were more curious than I am. So let's go down that trail for a minute, right?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you have it linked up or you could link it up later, but I did send over the link for my Instagram. So my handle is Biohacking Bombshell, and I do have a highlight bubble where if you guys want to see what I'm talking about, I do have pictures. And I did have people ask me, or I had some friends even comment and say, I can't believe you're posting pictures of your coffee enema expelled solutions afterwards. Like, I can't believe you're doing that. And so one of the things that I say is that I'm always very transparent about my health journey. And as a practitioner, I feel that's so important because it's so lonely. A lot of times you feel like you're the only one dealing with what you're dealing with because so many people don't feel comfortable talking about it. They're made to feel like they're not normal. And there's just this stigma where if I keep my mouth shut, I'm keeping people from healing. So I'm like, I know that this is something that's super powerful. Someone may say I'm going to do a coffee enema, but if they don't know enough about it, maybe they won't feel comfortable enough to actually pull the trigger and do it. So I did. I decided that I'm the type of person that I want to know if something's working. And I did decide to go through my solution because I had seen other practitioners go through theirs and shared it. And so it inspired me. And I'm like, I need to tell people what to look for. Yeah. I want them to know that what they think may be food in their stool when they're just having a bowel movement or whatever comes out after an enema, you may think it's food and it's not. And it's a sign that there's parasites, and whatever your bowel movements look like tells me a lot about what's going on with you. So I shared what mine looked like.
Well, it's definitely an indicator. And, like there's a couple of things I want to say here. It's like when I started intermittent fasting almost I think February is going to be 9 years. Okay. I was a super early adopter in intermittent fasting. And everybody said that, like, how'd you lose this 40 pounds? You're 40 years old. How'd you lose it? Yeah. I'm like, I fast during the day. I undereat during the day. And then I have one big meal at night. Well, what we now call OMAD, right? I was doing the warrior diet. It was a 20-hour with a 4-hour feeding window, right? And every single person said I could never do that. Never do that. Even though organically a lot of men kind of do that. They get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, they have a late lunch, right? And then they're doing the 16-8 anyway, but then mentally could not wrap their head around the fact that they were going to fast every day and then have a feeding window and eat their calories in that window. Right now, you got 18-year-olds that fast. Yeah. Right. And so basically, we're doing the same thing with that. We're bringing this back around because, Max Gerson World War I is where this was really discovered because they didn't have morphine. And so they were prescribed to do enemas for pain mitigation. And the nurses only had one way to heat up water in the war zone, and that was in a coffee pot. And so they were making coffee enemas to give people in in Germany, right, during World War I, right? So this is really how it came about. So the next piece of this, though, is that through my research, is that I found that in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in the Vatican in like the 1970s, they have Jesus Christ talking about doing enemas. So like lays out the whole thing, right? So this is not something that you invented or I invented or those type of things. This is something that is been around for a long, long time. The ancient Greeks have, talked about this stuff. And so it's been around for a long time. But our culture doesn't want to talk about poop.
Right. Yeah.
They just don't. Right. And they definitely don't want to see what comes out of somebody else's body. Right. I think we're okay what comes out of our own body, but maybe not somebody else's. Right.
Yeah, I didn't think so until I have gotten the most messages ever on Instagram after posting that, with people being like, it's like one of the things where it's like a car accident. You can't look away. And it makes me want to do it. So people are like repulsed, but intrigued by it at the same time. And I'm like, that's the goal. So thank you.
Yes. Well, I will say this, there's a couple of things that happened. One is that I did feel lighter, right? Because you are cleaning yourself out, right? I lost a couple pounds, right? I did do that. But I started sleeping better. My energy went up, right? And my face cleared up. You can't see anything there's nothing on there, right? My skin cleared up. There's just all kind of benefits that I got from that. And I actually talked about that. I did a solo show, where I was like on day 24 of the 29 days that I did them. And so I can link that up in there as well. People want to go back to that show. It was one of the very first live shows that I did. I talked about, what am I going to do on this? Because on Wednesdays, I call it Biohack Whack Wednesday, right? It's all these self-tests that I've done to myself over the years. I kind of chronicle them or tell about the benefits. This week, I talked about, I don't know if you've seen this thing, the Jawzrsize, right?
Okay.
So I talked about the benefits that I found with that and how my wife didn't like it. Right. I've talked about ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, those type of things. But so what benefits other than getting liver flukes and eggs and parasites out of your body, what other benefits have you seen from doing the enemas?
So if someone is dealing with like constipation, especially, and I think it's important to clarify what I deem as constipation. If someone is trying to detox, if they're toxic, if you're dealing with any type of health symptoms, I don't care whether it's brain fog, you got gut issues, you have skin issues that essentially are stemming from the gut or the liver, weight loss resistance, whatever it may be. You have clogged drainage pathways. So you have to take care of the colon first, because if the colon's backed up, it goes into the liver, which is what we're addressing with coffee enemas. So ultimately with coffee enemas, it's nice because it's kind of a twofer. It starts to get like the two major drainage pathways that we want to look at. So if someone's constipated, for example, they're going maybe one time a day, maybe 1 to 2. And especially if they're not able to just go sit down, do their business and get out, they have slow bowel motility. So if you need help and assistance with that, I'm not saying rely on coffee enemas for the rest of your life, because we need to work on the underlying issues, of course, of why you're constipated in the first place, but it can be very assistive with that. And then anyone that has liver-based symptoms, it's extremely powerful, especially for people that have brain fog and hormonal-based issues or hot flashes. You're waking up in the middle of the night between like 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. You have a lot of congestion and you're waking up at the time where your liver's trying to detox. So better sleep, like you said, better mental clarity, getting those metabolites out that are stuck into your liver, that are, hormone metabolites, women with estrogen dominance. I could go on and on about the different benefits there. But for me personally, it is sleep, it is mental clarity and feeling lighter. And ultimately, some people may not feel like, oh my gosh, I want to go run a marathon the first time that they do it. But it's over time, consistently getting those toxins out, especially if you've accrued it over the years, you're going to start seeing them long term. And I think it's important to set up proper expectations for people, because if they just do a couple and they're like, oh my God, it's not like I feel like I'm, 20 years younger, they may think it's just not working for me. And that's not the case.
No, and that's one of the reasons why my original commitment was 28 days, right? Is because, there's a couple reasons why. One is that I know I normally do 90-day experiments on things, because I want to see, like, this show is a 90-day experiment, right? I'm going to evaluate at the end of February how this show is going. Right. But I also turned 50 in a year from March. So I'm almost 49 years old, and I want to be able to do a paunch push up and do a pistol squat and be at 9% body fat. Right. So I have micro tests or plans planned in there to get to that point to be able to do that when I'm 50. But I knew that I couldn't maintain doing a coffee enema a day for 90 days. Right. So I'm developing a longevity primer. It's called a jammer, right? So jammer is one who jams, right? And it's a 100-day program where you can tap into these different pillars like sleep and hydration, breath, wherever you're insufficient on these foundational pillars of increasing your health span. And it has these 3 28-day blocks. And I'm like, well, I did the same thing. It's like, if I may have this detox foundational pillar, right? And I think that you may need, not that I think, but you decide that you need to do, coffee enemas. I want to be able to say that, hey, I've done it for 28 days. I know what the experience is of that. So I did that. But the thing is that I didn't feel better after one. My face didn't clear up. Like, we didn't wake up in the morning and go, okay, this is all gone. Right. It was a process to get to that point. Did I feel lighter the first time? Yeah. Did I have a little bit more energy? Yes. Right. And that didn't come from because caffeine's not absorbed that way, guys.
Right.
Caffeine absorbed, like, this cup of coffee is 3.5 times stronger than it would be if it goes in the other direction.
Yeah. People don't understand that. So
yeah, exactly. Right. And so I just, yes, is there a little boost? But it's from a different thing, right? Because every drop of blood is cleansed by your liver in 3 minutes, right? So if you're able to hold this solution in for 9 minutes, you got 3 solid cleansings of the blood, stimulating with glutathione, doing all these things and stimulating the liver in a different way than what you do. And so you're detoxing those type of things. And so, so you're right. Doing it once or twice and saying this isn't for me is not a true test of what this really is. So what's the next? And well, here's the thing. I did them. And so I basically done on average one every 10. I'm trying to do one every week, but it's basically coming out one every 10 days since that ended. Okay. Right. So I'm continually going down that path to get the benefits of it. And I may do another run, right, where I may do that, but doing 5 live shows a week, coaching clients, those type of things. It's not like I have 45 minutes every day to do that, right? To do the whole process. So what's the next step you think of, once because how many are you doing, or how many are you still doing them?
To clarify that, because some people have different feedback about this. I have a coffee enema highlight on my, Instagram, because I get so many of the same questions about that. When it comes to, what type of coffee should you choose? That's really important. What's the best? Should you use a bucket? Should you use a bag? And then, can you bulk make the solution? How long do you leave it in you, right? So initially with like the Gerson protocol, they were saying, 12 to 15 minutes. And then further studies that have been done by some other practitioners that, I study under, up to 20 minutes can be substantially more beneficial. So what I actually do, and what I think is the most time savvy for a lot of people, is to do 2 back-to-back. I know you said taking 45 minutes to do a coffee enema, right? So if I'm thinking, how long does it take me to not only make the coffee, put it through the French press, let it steep, right? Let it cool, because you have to wait until it gets to at least body temperature to put it in you, or you're going to burn yourself. And then retain it for 15 to 20 minutes, evacuate, another 15 to 20 minutes, evacuate. We're at like at least a good hour, right? So with that being said, some people would be like, okay, well, I'm trying to still also get a workout in, and then I want to do sauna, and then I'm trying to meal prep so I cook right. So I think doing a coffee enema every day for a lot of people, including myself, I'm like, I don't have time to do it every day. Not all the other stuff that I want to also be able to get done. So I want to make it the most effective when I do it. So I do 2 back-to-back. And it's literally so substantially different. I recommend that for anybody. I think it's worth it. So I do 2 back-to-back, and I'll do it, once or twice a week at this point. It depends what I have the time for. But I think it's important to kind of also meet someone where they're at and say, just do a couple of them to start. It took me probably 5 or 6 of them before I'm like, I got the hang of this. It's cool. I'm going to watch a YouTube video or training while I'm doing it, and I'm good to go. Or you get caught up on your Netflix binge series, right? Yeah. So that's how I would handle that as well. That's how often I do mine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing. I got to the point where I was like, I'm watching a TED talk on breathing. I learned a breathing trick while I was doing this. Right. And I'm watching, like maybe how to like get more viewers for the show. Right. Watching something about my marketing piece or the puzzle, or, it's really, you can do other things. It's not a singular event, but the only time I've ever done back-to-back it wasn't with a coffee enema. I got brave, because I keep asking why, right? And I was like, you know what? I really think I've got a candida overgrowth issue. And I'm like, so what kind of enema would be the best for that? Because I was hoping that the coffee one would help with that. And I think it did, right? But then I decided to do a raw apple cider vinegar enema, right, to try that. And that was just this past Sunday. And that was brutal. I'm telling you right now, that one was not easy.
Fermented products when we have candida though, and it can depend. So the causes of candida and SIBO can vary, but when you're feeding candida, which is yeast overgrowth, with something that is fermented and can feed yeast, you just have to be careful. So it can also depend on whether the yeast is more like in the gut, if it's more like you have like anal, vaginal, it can spread all over. People think it's, just one area. So I haven't personally done those, but I'll be interested to see if you feel like it alleviated anything for you.
It did. I think it did. Now I would tell you this, that what research I've done after that, because it actually, when I say it was brutal, it was painful, right? In my body, I couldn't hold it in, right? There was no retention time. I mean, it was like seconds, and it was like, and so I did two, thinking that the first one was like a fluke, and I haven't done one in 10 days or something like that. And I had some pain in my intestines, right? And then I read an article about even people who have a bad overgrowth, a really bad case of candida. That even drinking raw apple cider vinegar can cause pain in your intestines, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so the next day I immediately felt better. And so this was on Sunday. This is like 5 days ago, right? 6 days ago now that I did this. And I'm like, wow, I feel better. Right. And so so last night I made like a drink with some water and some raw apple cider vinegar in it, just to see how I felt. And it actually brought me down some, where normally that would give you energy, right? And I'm like going, it's still there, but and I'm noticing how vinegar has this impact on me in that way. So it was a pretty strong solution. And the recipe I decided to follow was a tablespoon for every cup of water, right? Mm-hmm. And which is way too strong for me, right? If I do it again, I'm gonna do like a teaspoon for 3 cups of water, right? I'm not even gonna, it's gonna be like 1/6 of what I did before, right?
Personally, anything that's fermented though, I would just really watch, especially consuming it orally. You're gonna feed that more, so I would just be really careful with it. It may be making you feel better for other reasons, but it could still feed the candida issue.
Yeah, exactly right. So there's other work that I need to do there, and I get it, right? And because
I love that you experiment. I love that you.
Yeah, I do all the time, right? And that goes back to what we were talking about before the show, my mindset of being a racer, right? And when you're a racer, you may show up to the track, and this week you're the slowest person there, right? Because it's a cycle that goes around. People, you get kind of like, you get on the top and you're fast, and then you become complacent and you don't change anything. You go up, but people are working to catch you, right? Then they pass you, right? So what happens is that you have to sometimes you have to go, well, let's start over. Right. Let's just completely start over. And that's where I stay in this mentality of how can I perform? It started with don't get fat, don't get cancer. Right. Then it was like, as a restaurant manager, how can I perform at my best day in and day out every single day? Give, myself to my family as well when I'm not working. And so this is, how this whole process really came about, and all these things worked out. So, wow. I mean, we've covered a lot, and we're at 30 minutes already, right? You and I are both fast talkers. So, with that, what is, you mentioned earlier and I don't know if you've done so many different things, and you're willing to put this on Instagram and put this out for people. What are other things that you would love to have people go to your Instagram feed, one of your highlights, and say, go look at this because this is super important for your health?
So not everything is in a highlight for sure. I have been talking about opening drainage pathways and addressing parasites a lot more lately, just because so many times, we don't realize that. I really love this one company called Cellcore. They have a drainage funnel, and it is just the perfect image of what we feel like, in what order we need to be addressing things. Because so many times we're trying to band-aid surface level things. Is it helpful to be able to have celery juice or whatnot, for example? There's all different, things out there, and not going to knock celery juice. I have several friends that they get super offended if I'm like, I don't think it's something that we need to do every day. And they're like, oh my God, it's changed my life. And I'm like, if it's changed your life, that's great. But there's a lot of people that say, I can't do that and run it through a juicer every single day, or it's an inconvenience for them. And I'm like, okay, well, it's okay, because it's not the most important thing to do. My goal is to always help people understand that whatever symptom they're experiencing, whether it's a hormonal imbalance, we're having thyroid issues, sleep issues, brain fog, or whatever, I like to take them through the peeling back of the layers and say, okay, let's start by making sure you're pooping at least 2, if not 3 times a day. Then we go and we're like, okay, the liver needs to be opened up, make sure that the lymph is moving. And how do we do these things? So walking someone through, can you do it through breath work? Or coffee enemas? Absolutely. Can you do it through, can exercise stimulate the bowels to move? Yes. So ultimately, any of the content that I have there, I address all different things, depends on what resonates most with people. But hitting on parasites and drainage, they're my biggest things that I hit on there. And that would be the place that I would want someone to start, because even if we're eating clean, even if we're working out, and this was me before, guys, like it was eat very clean, work out, and I'm like, oh my God, but that's still not enough. That's when we have to say, okay, it's because we didn't get to the root cause yet. Food is great, exercise is great, but for many people, especially with chronic illness, it's not enough. So we have to open those drainage pathways. That's the biggest thing for me.
Right. Because you're over here and you're toxic, right? The pendulum's way over here. You want to be in the middle, which is like this pillar of health. Sometimes you have to swing way over here, right? And do things that are over here in this realm to get to where it averages out, right? Mm-hmm. And I love what you say. It's the same thing. You just said it in a slightly different way than what I do is you have to start where you are, right? And meaning that you have to start where what your mind can wrap around. Like, when I started intermittent fasting, everybody was like, and this is almost 9 years ago, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. But because they couldn't wrap their mind around intermittent fasting. And then now not everybody, but there's a lot of people doing that. And also the second piece of this is that do what works for you, right? If celery juice works for you, it works for you. And here's another really key thing is what works for you may or may not be what works for the person that lives in the same house as you, right? Yep. Because they grew up differently. They got a different microbiome that was handed down from mom, right? And they ate differently growing up, and things like that. So like my wife doesn't have to do the extreme things that I do on the level to be just as healthy as I am. She's naturally more alkaline than I am. We've done tests side by side, eat the same exact meal, same amount of meal. She's more alkaline than I am. And she's more of a Mediterranean style. She's not keto. She doesn't like doing keto. She grew up in New York, eats pizza and pasta and those type of things, right? Where I'm, do more things to get to the same place that she is. And so I think that's super important to understand. What works for you is not going to be, and even sleep schedules. She's an early riser, right? I'm a night owl, right? So we, and if I push dinner back, right, to fit my style, it is too late for her and her sleep's interrupted. So we have to balance this out in the house to make sure everybody's optimized as best we can, with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't compare your journey to anyone else's. And I know it's super frustrating, especially if you see that one type of style, whether it's eating one meal a day or intermittent fasting or keto, especially keto. I see a lot of my clients come in and get frustrated because they did it for a couple of weeks and it stopped working or it didn't work at all for them. And I'm like, listen, hormonal optimization is not there a lot of times for women doing keto specifically. It depends on the person and it depends on your bioindividuality, your toxic exposures up to this point. So that's where it can be helpful, whether it's you or whether it's me, having someone in their corner that really does know what they're talking about and understands how to take into consideration someone's past health history or their current health status and is able to look at all these parameters and say, this is what's going to work for you, Sally, or this is what's going to work for you, Mark, just so that you feel like you have that third party validation and verification so that you don't stay in this analysis paralysis in this area of frustration where you kind of just throw the towel in altogether and say nothing's going to work. There is something that will work for you. You just may not know it or have the knowledge yet to be able to do that. So seek someone out that can help you.
Exactly. The thing is that when I talked to and interviewed Dr. Mindy Peltz, she talked about how with women doing keto, that they need to cycle, right? And because you need carbs at a certain time of the month, right? To, no pun intended, cycling your keto for your cycle, right? I think one of the, it's different between men and women. We don't have a 28-day feedback loop to tell us how we're doing, right? Women, if they're not doing things right, their cycle starts changing, right? And so it may skip a month, or if there's something that are really, really like cutting too much fat, like you've heard bodybuilders talking about like that, when they're really like trying to get super lean, those type of things. And so it's like, I've so many women have told me that the style of keto I do doesn't work for them. Right. And it's because we're different in a lot of ways. I mean, I can like mentally go, hey, I want to lose 5 pounds. And by the time the days ended, I probably lost a couple pounds, right? Just mentally, that's how a guy works, right? And where women, a lot of times, like they say they want to lose a couple pounds, they have to do all these other things to do it. And it's harder for them to do that. And I get it. And I respect that. That's why I love interviewing people like you and Dr. Mindy Pelz, because it helps me understand more about what's going on with a woman than it does with the guys like me. Cause it's relatively simple. We're going to work out a little bit more, eat a little bit less, and, our pants fit better. Right.
Yeah. It's very different for a female. It's a little more complex when it comes to that, but there's still these major pillars that I can say to somebody: open up your drainage pathways, address parasites, start to address the other toxins and pathogens, and everyone will be seeing results. It's when we start being like, oh, okay, well, let's do like bioidentical progesterone cream, and let's do like the estrogen pellets or birth control for females. Then I'm like, we never got to the root cause. That's why you continue to have issues here. And I have men that'll say, my testosterone went down. Like, I know it can go down a little bit as you get older, but we give it way too much weight. And then we just start supplementing with testosterone. And it's like, do you realize it's not just age that's causing that? And you guys have to optimize your hormones just in a different way. Yeah.
Right. And, like the blue pill, Viagra, right, is, basically a nitric oxide, producer, right? And you can buy supplements to do that. You also can breathe through your nose, and there's nitric oxide is released. Your nose has 30 to 40 functions, right? 70% of adults in America are mouth breathers.
Yep.
Right. If you snore, you're breathing through your mouth while you're sleeping. And you're sending signals to your nervous system that you're in fight and flight. Yeah. So what happens is if you switch to, like, I use mouth tape, I tape my mouth shut, I use Somnifix, and I've been doing it for over 2 years, and it total freaking game changer. So what happens is that you don't have to take a blue pill. You don't have to take supplements. You have to do those things. You got to change the way you breathe, right, to get nitric oxide, because it's like this thing that nobody really talks about.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can fix a lot of these things through your breath. Right? Because if 70% of Americans are breathing through their mouth, they're sending signals to their nervous system that they need to be in fight or flight, stressed out. And constant stress doesn't allow for rest, relaxation, digest, calmness, emotional intelligence, scores increase, right? Those type of things. And you live in this constant state of stress, you're going to give yourself a chronic disease. Yeah. Right? And that's probably, why the reason why my parents got, not even just diet, the Southern version of the standard American diet, which is another whole, bad thing about it, the deep, fried Southern diet. But my point is that stress is a big piece of this, and that can change your nervous system, which one you're in, just on your breath, how you breathe. Right? Yeah. And people don't, and then also hydration. If you're chronically dehydrated, which 73% of Americans are, right, your blood could be thicker, and that could cause heart disease. Right?
Yeah. Your body is like the wall, the membrane is made up of water. And so I love how you're starting to transition into what are the other sources of stress? Because so many people, and this was me in the beginning as well, when I had doctors say, I think you're just a type A personality, you need to relax. I was like, you're completely like devaluing or invalidating my symptoms and basically saying I need to stress less. Stress management is important. And I would be first to say that I don't think that we emphasize that enough, but what you're eating is a stressor. How much water you're drinking is a stressor. How toxic your water is, drinking tap water, is a stressor. Sitting in a moldy home that maybe smells like mildew is a stressor. It's having amalgam silver fillings, and identifying the root causes, the stressors for you, is the first thing. We need to identify that so that we're able to address it. So I love that you hit on those other things.
Right. I was listening to David Sinclair last night, and he said, everything that we ingest is a molecule that has a side effect. Mm-hmm. Everything. Because people are like, tell me what supplements you take to be 50 and not have gray hair and not have wrinkles and those type of things, right? And back to what I said, I'm not going to eat my way out of this. There's not a pill. I don't even take supplements anymore because I'm like going, they're not in the right proportion they're not stacked the right way. I could take this vitamin C and I can take a D and I can take an E, and I occasionally take about once or twice a week, I take a B12, right? Because, I'm more plant-based now and I don't get a lot of B12 from my diet and those type of things. But the thing is that, so when he says everything we put in our body is a molecule, so that's a supplement, but that's also food, right? So what happens is you may be allergic or lactose intolerant or gluten intolerant or have celiac disease. Those are molecules that has a negative side effect for you, where somebody else, it could be a positive side effect. I don't eat gluten. I'm gluten intolerant, right? And that didn't come up and bubble up for me until after I was keto for a while. And I had a cheat day after about 18 months, my first cheat day. And now all of a sudden I'm gluten intolerant, but where I still buy pizza for my kids, right? And my wife eats it and she makes them pasta out of wheat. And I just don't have those things because it doesn't work for me. And so it's really an interesting thing when we start looking at all of those different pieces of the puzzle. Like some people, vinegar doesn't work for them. Some people, coffee doesn't work for them and they like green tea or no caffeine at all. So all these things, every single thing's a molecule that has a side effect, that was so eye-opening for scientists to say that, which is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that we all have different bioindividuality. And then there are some clients, to be transparent here, that I have to have a conversation with, where if some people say, well, I'm not lactose intolerant, because I was diagnosed very young. I'm not gluten intolerant. It doesn't come back up on a test. Just because you're not diagnosed as lactose intolerant or gluten intolerant doesn't mean it's not abrasive to the gut. And so, or just because your bioindividuality may make it so that you basically have to fill up your toxic bucket, inflammation bucket, to the tippy top before you even start experiencing a symptom. Whereas someone like you or me may get to the point where it's like they have a little and all of a sudden they're having an issue. So just because we don't have symptoms, I think symptoms are extremely powerful and we need to stay aware of them. But we also need to acknowledge, the studies and the science that have been done of what is inflammatory and what's not. And if we know that, whether we're experiencing symptoms or not, it can accrue over time and cause an issue later. It just could be arising as a different symptom in different people. So,
right. I grew up eating pulled pork barbecue sandwiches. I think I'm from South Carolina, mustard-based barbecue sauce, all those things. And a dear friend of mine, he passed away from brain cancer, a chef, like Hall of Fame French chef. I mean, we went to church together. We cooked men's breakfast, and Chef Mike Norman. And he had brain cancer, had surgery. And he goes, Scott, hey, the doctors want me to look at, doing an anti-inflammatory diet. And he goes, here's some options, right? And every single anti-inflammatory diet I've ever looked at has no pork on it, right? And I grew up eating barbecue. Like that was like my staple, right? Burgers, pulled pork barbecue, ribs, those type of things. But yet you look now as like looking back at that you're like going, I'm eating inflammatory things with French fries, right? That are cooked in probably trans fats back in the day when I was in, high school and before all those things. And so
your connection is really, really fuzzy for me, if you can hear me.
Okay. It happens sometimes. It should catch up. I can hear you just fine. We're good. Okay. It's, but the thing is that we don't even realize the inflammatory things because we're so used to feeling inflamed that we don't really understand it. Can you hear me? This is the joys of being live, folks. She can't hear me now. We'll have to wait for this to catch up. All right, so I'm getting some chats. Got it. Can you hear me now?
You're still really broken up. I heard you just say that, but.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with it. But we can, let's just, can you tell people where they can find you online? Okay. We lost her. All right. So maybe she'll dial back in. In the meantime, I'm going to, now she's the Biohacking Bombshell, Allyssa LaScala. You can find her there. We're about 45 5 minutes into the show. Super, super good show for those who've been here. Again, part of the Spirituality Gone Wild Network. My name is Scott Stanfield. I'm just going to wrap this up here. And I don't know what happened with that, but this is the joys of going live and being live. And we got to talk about detoxing coffee enemas. And so it's super cool. So next week, I'm going to be speaking on Tuesday and Wednesday at the Biotech 2020 virtual conference based out of London. So the show's going to be later in the day. There'll be solo episodes on Tuesday and Wednesday. And so stay tuned for that. Look for post on when those shows going to be out. I also put posts up on when I'm speaking, so you can, and I'm going to be speaking about sleep, which is the most important pillar of all the pillars of being a modern longevitarian. So I look forward to that and everything. So I'm going to wrap this up here, and it is my Friday, but if it's just your Friday, I hope you have a great weekend. And so thanks again to the Spirituality Gone Wild. Cheers.